Welcome back to Cherry Bekaert's Government and Public Sector podcast series. This will be the first in our mini-series about library systems. I'm Denise Lippuner, and I lead Cherry Bekaert's state and local advisory practice. Our state and local practice is part of our government and public sector practice, where we have a dedicated team focused on serving public sector clients throughout the country. And now I'm going to hand it over to Paul Volkers to introduce himself. Paul?
Thanks, Denise. My name is Paul Folkers, Senior Manager with Cherry Bekaert. I spent almost 30 years working in local government as an assistant city or county manager for 2 cities and 2 counties. So really come at it from a practitioner standpoint, but very excited to be able to work to support local governments. And I think it's a very exciting time in terms of what data and the vast amounts of data that local governments collect, but what data analytics can do to support local governments and their missions.
All right, thanks, Paul. And I'd like to introduce next Velencia Posso. Velencia?
Hi, I'm Velencia Posso, and I started working in libraries in 2013 after volunteering in 2012. I received my bachelor's in information and library science and my ALA accredited master's in information science. So I am passionate about library systems. I'm currently with Cherry Bekaert as a data analyst. So I'm excited to speak with you both more about how data analytics can help improve our library services.
Wonderful. So before we delve into the library system, I'd like to discuss in general, how are local governments doing with collecting and utilizing data to further their missions? Paul, can you provide us with your perspective?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for local governments, and I think some have moved aggressively into that area to really try to utilize their data to better their performance and achieve stronger outcomes. But with local governments, it's always a challenge because local governments are really very diverse businesses. If you look at it from all the different departments that a local government has, parks and recreation, police, fire, planning. There's just so many different lines of businesses that those organizations have, and so many demands on them. You really, because local governments are really the closest to the citizen and delivering service every day. And though I always look at it as local government officials, there's nowhere to hide, even if you wanted to, because the citizens know where City Hall is or the county administration building. And so there's tremendous opportunity because local governments collect huge amounts of data. But really the challenge is, what are they doing with that data? And I think there's a great opportunity for many to really shift and evolve in terms of what they do with their data and how they use it to be able to track their organizational performance, make sure they're making good use of the resources they have, and really making and achieving the outcomes consistent with their missions of their organizations. And I think that's where some of them have been able to get resources, but it's really tough. These resources are in tremendous demand in the private sector as well as in the public sector. So even if you're able to get staff with the expertise and the capabilities, it's tough for local governments to keep them. And so that's where everybody needs some help from time to time. But I see tremendous opportunity, and I see it's not going away. And I think there's going to be greater expectations from governing bodies as well as citizens that local governments use that data to be able to share with the community, but also be able to show how they're doing and how well they're doing in terms of efficiency and effectiveness.
All right, thanks, Paul. So now that we have a big picture view of where local governments are in collecting and utilizing data, where do libraries typically fit in governmental organizations?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it does kind of cover the spectrum a bit. I think typically, although you can have local governments, at least from what I see, are typically, provided at a county level, so which kind of makes sense in terms of economies of scale. But you can have city library systems, but more typically county library systems. And then sometimes they could be just departments or within a local government organization. So just one of the departments, libraries, police, fire, parks and recreation. In other cases, communities have really set them up as their own independent authorities, and in some cases with their own taxing authority, so that their governing bodies can actually set their own tax rates. So certainly it's a little bit different picture for those organizations that are able to set their own tax rates and in terms of the funding and the resources they have available to fulfill their missions. So it kind of covers the spectrum a bit, but it does impact their how they need to fulfill their mission, who they report to, and what resources they might have. And I'm sure Velencia, having worked within the field, has a perspective on that as well.
That is very interesting. I was not aware about the different, how it's varied depending on where the library sits within a local government. So thank you for sharing that, Paul. So Valencia, the pandemic has affected how every organization conducts its business. And I want to touch on how libraries were affected both pre and post-pandemic. So let's start off with pre-pandemic. Can you tell us if there were significant changes and trends evident in libraries prior to the pandemic?
Yes, of course. Libraries, a lot of times, and you might hear like, oh, I haven't been to a library in ages. I haven't been to a library since I was a kid. And that's what would happen a lot of times when I tell people, oh, I'm a librarian. Or when I was going to school for library science, it'd be like, oh, you go to school for that. So libraries have been having this challenge of staying relevant in our communities. So we're constantly progressing. There was a campaign through American Library Association, ALA. It was Libraries Transform. So they were focusing on how libraries transform lives and communities through education. And that was advocating for lifelong learning and a real conversation starter in communities, how libraries are vital and a smart investment. So libraries prior to the pandemic were already focusing on diversifying their offerings specific to their communities and trying to bridge those gaps in the digital divide, introducing technology like maker spaces or library of things. Those were becoming real popular before the pandemic. And I think we're seeing those even more so ramping up, diversifying those services.
Great. And so how did the pandemic impact these trends and where do you see things headed in the future?
Definitely moving services online. A lot of people, they think of a library and they think of going to a physical building. So now we have our digital libraries and people are focusing on their online services and how our services are adaptable and accessible. So we can move throughout things like the pandemic and being online and not being able to be in person. Or if your main thing is my community has trouble with the digital divide, people are coming in to use computers, figuring out different ways to navigate that. Like we have to have social distancing. Do we do that in the physical space? Do we create an online reservation system? How can we keep our services for our community, but also navigate this change? A lot of libraries were partnering with people to offer hotspots. And so people that didn't have access to the internet at their homes could still have access to the internet through the library and you check out those hotspots. Speaking with a public librarian friend of mine, we've seen this in academic libraries. They'll loan out laptops. So they're trying to figure out how they can loan out laptops in the public library space as well. And what I thought was really interesting moving forward in the pandemic is with trying to offer those online services. Frederick County, one of the systems we work with here at Cherry Bekaert, noticed that their online services ballooned in the pandemic more than they had ever seen before. And now as we come out the pandemic and their doors are open and their services are open in person, they haven't decreased. Now that people know these services are being offered, they're still using them on a consistent basis. So it was interesting how the pandemic actually helped in that way.
That's fascinating. So moving on to a different topic, it seems like the core mission of libraries is to collect and share information with their communities, as you were discussing, Valencia. So I am curious as to your thoughts on whether or not libraries have the time and resources to do the same thing internally, looking at the data they have and how it can be collected, shared, and analyzed to improve their own operations. Paul, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic just in terms of as technology changes and evolves, and then how that impacts organizations and what they do and how they do it. And I think certainly libraries it fits right within that. And I think it's a matter of kind of being able to as things change, be able to define, change and evolve our thinking in terms of what is our purpose, what is our mission, what are we here to do, because maybe the way we were doing things isn't really the best fit anymore. But really being able to show that relevance and then be able to kind of prove, what we're doing and how it contributes to the overall mission of an organization or an institution. To me, that's the opportunity to read that you can do that, and really stories are very effective. So the data's there, but to me, you got to be able to have the data's got to be able to help to tell a story that resonates with people. And in this case, if the library is looking to kind of show that they're effectively using dollars, well, certainly the data analytics can help do that. If they're looking to show how they're engaging and collaborating with the community organizations and their residents, data analytics can help do that. And if they're looking to kind of show how they're achieving the outcomes that really support the overall mission of the organizations of institution, data analytics can help do that, and through stories. And that's a great way to help in tight budget times be able to help support sustaining an existing budget. And when there's times where there might be dollars available, to go, additional dollars available to be able to really support those requests for additional services and things that library systems can use to further enhance their services. They're telling a good story. They're telling that they're making good use of dollars, and they can be trusted to make sure those new dollars will contribute to the overall mission of the organization.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. Valencia, since you've actually worked in a library, I'm curious about your perspectives on whether or not libraries have the time and resources to basically analyze their own data to improve their operations.
I think it definitely depends. Each library is uniquely situated, kind of like how Paul was mentioning earlier. They might exist differently based on the county, city, municipality. So it kind of just depends on what resources that they have and what resources they need and what data they're looking to kind of gather and how they want to improve their operations, where their operations sit as it is. Smaller libraries, maybe their focus is more community based and getting the books out there, whereas other larger libraries may be focused on things like I was mentioning earlier, like a library of things. Maybe patrons are coming in and checking out tools and using sewing machines. And the services are just so wildly different that they have to think about what they're collecting and the best way to collect it, and if they have the resources to collect it in a way that's not taking away from something else.
And Denise, could I add on to that real quick?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think because I think that's a really good point, and I think it's really it's a tough thing, and a lot of times it's those that actually might do something. So whether it's a doctor providing medical services or a shoemaker making shoes, it's like a lot of times it's those that are they're so busy doing the service for somebody else that oftentimes they don't necessarily think about or don't focus on thinking about how to do. They've got the skills and abilities, but really do the same thing for themselves and their own operation. So sometimes it's kind of taking that step back, but it's also kind of recognizing when it can be very labor intensive, and you do need the staff that knows the technology, that knows how to do it, that can help simplify things, help automate things, so that the analytics can don't create extra burden on staff, but actually can relieve staff of burden at the same time, providing very useful data that can help their decision making in a timely way. But it's hard to get those staff. So, and even if they can, you might have some more well-to-do district library systems or districts that are able to hire staff dedicated to that purpose. But even those, it can be tough to keep them. So that's where I think sometimes the services from firms that are dedicated to providing that kind of support can really help get in there and help establish a program, and maybe just establish it so that they can run it with themselves, or provide some level of ongoing expertise and support, which can, I think, really help advance an analytics program tremendously.
Yeah. So in addition to the challenges that you mentioned about finding skilled staff, given all the competition out there, what are some additional typical challenges libraries face in gathering and utilizing data? And are there any good examples of libraries that have been able to better utilize data to improve library operations and outcomes over time? Paul, you want to take that first?
Sure. I think, I think a good example, and I think Valencia kind of mentioned some of the work that Chair Bekaert's done in the state of Maryland. We've done extensive work in the state of Maryland, but I think a good example that would kind of talk about not creating additional burden on the organization, but actually help simplify things for them. So the work that was done for the Prince George's County, Maryland library system, which is a very large system just outside Washington, D.C. Through working with them, they were able to reduce their reporting times by 60%. Which is a huge increase in efficiency and time savings. At the same time, the increasing system-wide circulation and enabling more targeted outreach for their community programs. So that's just kind of one example, but it's really, I think, great opportunities for, again, simplification as well as providing intelligence and insights that allow for more benefits to the community, greater effectiveness, and the library staff to focus on those things that are most effective in terms of reaching and supporting their communities.
Thanks, Paul. So, Valencia, do you have any additional examples to share?
Yes, I'm currently working on a project with PG County as well, the library system, and we are working on developing a new dashboard with the census data. And just looking at it, I can only imagine all the great things they're going to do with that. If you look at the case study that's already published, they learned that only 5% of one elementary school students are visiting a nearby library. So they contacted the school, did outreach programs, and had nearly 60% students now consistently visiting the library. So with the census data dashboard that I'm working on now with another colleague at Cherry Bekaert, seeing just the proximity of certain demographics to certain branches, I'm thinking like, oh, wow, we could have more Spanish-led programs, or this library needs more Spanish books and things like that. And it's just thinking about how we can also support our veteran population that we're seeing more near certain libraries. So just thinking about how we can use that data and be data-driven, evidence-based librarians and focus on providing services that directly impact our community. And sometimes that challenge is maybe we don't have access to the census data easily. We don't understand how to read it, how to download it, how to get it into a system and easily analyzing it. So maybe you want to outsource that sort of information to get that together and put it in a dashboard so it's easy to understand. But then also maybe they don't have a door count, and it's just thinking about the different ways to look at all the data that's coming through. Like, do we know everyone that's coming in our library? Is someone doing a paper tally, or do we have an automatic door counter that's going into a system and telling us who's in and who's left? So thinking about those resources as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Are there any other support that is available to help libraries better utilize their data?
Yes, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, of course, and Public Library Association, and Cherry Bekaert. We are working with data analytics in the Maryland library systems. It's 27, I believe, systems across the state. So working with getting all of the metrics together in a way that's easy to understand, easy to digest, and easy to share, I think is definitely helpful for helping the libraries improve their services moving forward. And looking at the data in a customized way versus sort of an out-of-the-box way where everything's the same across the board. It's like we are looking at our analytics based on who your library is and getting to know your community and really looking at what's specific and important for their library.
Great, thank you. So we are now nearing the end of the podcast, and I want to thank both Paul and Valencia for joining us today. Before we go, I'd like each of you to share any parting thoughts as well as your email addresses in case any listeners have questions or want to follow up on anything that was discussed today. Paul, can you go first?
Yeah, thanks, Denise. So I guess I just kind of part with again, I see great opportunities out there for local governments as a whole, but certainly for library systems, and there's much more granular ways to collect data now, and the tools to analyze it, and if you're a library system that's still primarily, in terms of your workflows and using the data you've got, if you're primarily still using, Excel spreadsheets to manage and manipulate and graph your data, give us a call. We can simplify things for you and help you get what you need and do it in an easier way for you. And a lot of library systems are really still, organizations as a whole, local governments, but certainly within libraries too, still siloed, still kind of fragmented, and kind of a scattered approach sometimes to reporting data. So there's a better way, and I think here at Cherry Bekaert we're happy to to get with you to be able to help you, put you on that path to be able to better use data to support your missions. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody interested in talking further. My email address is paul.folkers. That's FOLKERS @cbh.com.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Valencia.
Hi, I just wanted to thank everyone for listening, and please subscribe to the podcast. We have 2 more library podcasts on the way with the state of Maryland and its local library systems. If you would like to reach out to me, my email is destiny, DESTINY, period, POSSO @cbh.com.
Great. Thank you. And as Valencia mentioned, we are going to have more sessions in our mini series on libraries. And so please subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening platform. And the next podcast in our series is going to discuss the work of the state of Maryland and its local library systems. So thank you for listening and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you. Bye.